Welcome everybody to Scoop News Group's weekly video recap, where I've brought together some of our editorial leaders, editors-in-chief, to talk about what our different publications are doing while we're all working remotely. Some stuff about COVID, some stuff not, but we want to keep everybody abreast of our coverage. I'm Billy Mitchell, editor-in-chief of FedScoop. I'm with Greg Otto, editor-in-chief of CyberScoop, and Jake Williams, editor of State Scoop and Ed Scoop. And we want to just kind of talk about what we're covering lately and kind of how all those things are touching together. So I'll toss it first over to Greg, and would love to hear some of the top stories you guys have been focusing on CyberScoop.
Yeah, it has been a really interesting week for us because now that everybody has adjusted to the new normal, the real topic that has been hitting home for us is looking forward. And looking forward, it's a lot of election security stories. We've had a number of election security stories over the past week because there has been this conversation now that's brewing and looking forward to say, okay, if this lasts into October and November, how are people going to vote in the general election? So there are two frames of thought right now. One is that we have the possibility of doing things over the internet, and then there is a push to do things by mail. Now, we've run a bunch of stories from security experts that have said internet voting just is not feasible for 2020. And I think of that from a number of areas in that we'd have to get the infrastructure set up. Like it's almost as big as like a census project almost. And think about how much time it takes to set up and secure the census. I mean, we've been writing stories about that for 4 or 5 years now. We can't do that in 4 or 5 months, but just about it from thinking about it from an IT operations perspective and then thinking about it from a security perspective, the security just isn't there on the internet. And we're talking about trying to audit and secure every vote that comes in and think about all of the vulnerabilities we talk about on a daily basis on the internet. And we're going to trust the internet to work in the way that we want it to when we're trying to guard the sanctity of voting. It just doesn't work. So we did a special package with an Australian podcast, Risky Business, that actually interviewed a bunch of security experts around the world that looked into a couple of different platforms that are being used, particularly the Votes app. I know Jake over at State Scoop, you've written about the Votes app a bunch of times. And there's just a lot of security issues in that app. Now, it's fine because that app was just getting off the ground and it was used in some small elections in West Virginia and in Washington. But the idea that we can somehow move that out to the entire country just because of the pandemic has had a lot of security experts go, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, that's not going to work. Maybe we can talk about that over the course of the decade, the next couple months. No, that's not going to work at all. So there's been a lot of talk about vote by mail, and there's a lot of cybersecurity experts that are trying to get involved with that because that is the quickest way to get something off the ground and also secure the vote. Paper is very, very secure when it comes to elections. So that's really been a big, big driver for us this week. And I imagine that we're going to be following up on it for the weeks and months to come.
Yeah, and do you see any chance where voting's not going to happen as normal in November, where it could be pushed back or take a lot longer before we know, if we're going to have the same president or a new president?
I mean, everything is so fluid that it's hard to, we don't know. We're trying to look into the looking glass as a society into what June and July is going to look at. God forbid, October and November, that it feels like is 5 years away with the way that everything unfolds on a day-to-day basis now. So it is way too early to say if we are going to vote at all. And that's an election law conversation that I do not have the expertise for. And it's something that we don't cover here. But from a technological and a security perspective, I think what's really been driven home this week is that online voting cannot be secured from a cybersecurity perspective and really should not be leaned on for a presidential election.
Great to hear. Good stuff. Jake, what are you guys following over on the state, local, and Ed Scoop beats?
Yeah, so our coverage is once again dominated by the new coronavirus pandemic. So state governments are starting to have some conversations about what to do with contact tracing, which is using citizens' mobile devices to track any physical interactions with someone who has tested positive for COVID-19. So states are looking at what that's going to mean for citizen privacy. So Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo has a plan to use a mobile app to do just that, but obviously, groups like the ACLU and others certainly have some privacy concerns. So that's going to be an issue that I think is just starting to percolate in the government sphere this week, and it's going to continue to percolate a little bit more in the weeks to come. Another big issue in the state government space comes with state unemployment systems. So a new report out just this week from the Information Technology Innovation Foundation found that most state unemployment websites, this is just the websites, not the actual systems themselves, but the websites, which is how citizens get to those unemployment systems, are very poorly designed. In fact, the think tank tested all 50 state websites for a variety of criteria and found that 86% of them failed at least one test. So that's definitely concerning when we talk about the massive numbers of unemployment requests that we've been seeing as a result of the pandemic. So another piece of that puzzle is how state government unemployment systems are so strained because of this massive load of residents filing for unemployment benefits. In Michigan alone, nearly 1 million people are out of work, and the state is using this opportunity to say, hey, our system's working sort of okay for now, but we need some help to modernize these systems, and we need some funding to modernize these IT systems that are really impacting daily life for citizens. Last
So
week, big news. Oh, go ahead, Greg. Yeah.
no, I was going to say the unemployment stuff is really, really interesting to me because it reminds me of what we saw with Zoom the past couple of weeks. Everybody
Yeah.
got on Zoom, and it's kind of been overwhelming from a security perspective. And Zoom has come out to say, "Okay, guys, we're going to fix it." And I wonder if that logic has followed on the state level with unemployment websites. Do you get the sense that the states realize, okay, we got to get people in here, and we got to get people in here now to try to refresh this as much as possible?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the most interesting things that we saw was at the beginning of last week, actually over the weekend before last. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy put out a very, very public plea for any coders in the state, or I think anywhere really, who know COBOL or COBOL. I don't even know how it's pronounced. It's older than me. COBOL came onto the scene as this prominent coding language decades ago and is still used primarily for mainframe-based financial and administrative systems. So overall, I mean, what's really key, Greg, is that this is a really interesting moment for us as a publication that covers IT in state and local governments, because we've been covering state and local government CIOs talking about legacy modernization for the entirety of our existence. And this is one of the first times in modern history, and in history of, I think, a publication like StateScoop, and I know FedScoop has had a couple of these instances over its lifespan, but one of the first times where the need for digital transformation and the need for these legacy systems to be rapidly modernized to help citizens in need has come to head with a real world crisis like the coronavirus pandemic. So pretty huge time for us. So I think it's going to be an issue that continues to develop as states need to both solve the problem at hand now and get developers who know the code to revitalize and work on these systems, but also as this starts to wane and the demand starts to hopefully lessen, probably a pretty good reason for some rapid modernization at the part of state government.
I just riffing off the COBOL stuff. I know we've heard from people at like the VA where they're using their old school Vista system for EHR, and literally, I mean, it's obviously not the crisis pandemic that we're facing today, but their problem is that there's literally not. They're running out of people who are alive who know how to do that because it's that old. It's such an old programming language that they can't find young people or people who are able-bodied coders that know COBOL. So it's an incredible situation that I think a lot of people are facing themselves or finding themselves in, but the scale at which New Jersey has kind of made national attention out of it is pretty incredible, I think.
So, Billy, from the unemployment side of things to the other check going out, I know the IRS has been firing off stimulus checks. I imagine you guys have been talking to the IRS a lot about what's going on there from an IT perspective. I'm sure that has not been an easy lift.
Yeah, I mean, all across government, people are struggling with the capacity. The IRS, whether it's IRS, the census, as you mentioned, are facing these really critical peak times where, though there's a pandemic going on, they have some major things that come every year or every 10 years. IRS, for instance, is dealing with what you said. They're going to have to send out these stimulus checks and deal with the surge of people coming online to get those digitally. So that's that's a new capacity that they didn't anticipate. Meanwhile, they're in the middle of tax season. Although they've given people granted them some leniency on being able to submit their taxes a little later. Those are two big lifts, and the IRS is an agency that has just struggled in the past and been really dogged in Congress by lawmakers who want to see better security and better capacity so that these things can be done digitally, so that people don't have to, spend weeks of their life filling out taxes and things like that, so that they can get their money back. So they're definitely facing some critical times, and the capacity that they need there is just unexpected, and just difficult, particularly as they, like other agencies across government, are moving their people to telework scenarios. And that's something we've covered a lot in the past couple of weeks, that CIOs are really focused at this point in time on making sure that their workforce can continue working towards the mission of the agency. So telework's a big thing. Cloud computing capacity is a big thing. Cybersecurity, obviously, as those people work from home and we're not in an office environment where somebody can control the types of things they do. Something as simple as printing something out and leaving it where somebody shouldn't see it is a concern. So there's a plethora of problems, but from the people I've talked to, the federal government, I think, is dealing with it in a bit of a better way, or they're dealing with it in a better way, but they've come out more lucky than I think some of their state and local counterparts have. And I think that's just because the funding's there, and because they have the closer attention of the White House and the federal CIO and people like that, who can really support their needs and enable them to do things more quickly. And I've talked to the federal CIO and several CIOs at different agencies, and they've all kind of sung praises about how they've been able to respond quickly. And although there's been some minor blips, things have largely been okay without any catastrophic type outages that really impact something. We'll see when people go to file their information for stimulus and whatnot, how that ends up. But I think people have, in a lot of cases, anticipated this was going to happen, or not anticipated that the crisis was going to happen, but they've been able to get ahead of it enough where there haven't been any major issues so far.
Right. Was always going to be an influx of people using the technology. I don't think anybody really thought it was going to be due to a worldwide pandemic.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys, good chat. And I'm sure we will have more to talk about that's COVID related and non-COVID related in the weeks to come.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
All right. Stay safe, guys.
Take care.